Just like that, the New York Mets have tied up the NLCS as things now shift to New York. We're breaking down the game on this live edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein, managing editor at justbaseball.com. And what a game we just watched. The New York Mets have tied up this series. All the talk about Kodai Senga and should the Mets have pitched him game one. You know what? It's all moot now. Sean Manaea gets the victory, and the Mets bats come alive against the Dodgers bullpen. They went bullpen game. The Mets capitalized right away. It got nerve-wracking, but this team holds on to get a huge victory, and now you got home field advantage. 3 games at Citi Field. Not to get greedy, but if you take them all, you don't have to go back to L.A., regardless, this is what you had to do. You had to get at least 1 game in LA to win this series. You might have to get 2, but the mission was go into Los Angeles, get one of these 2 games. The Mets did that. So huge victory. We'll go through all of it now. First inning, Francisco Lindor was once again the Mets MVP. Who's had a bigger impact this series? Do you think it's Shohei Ohtani, who they really do a good job capturing him in the dugout when his teammates are driving in runs? Or is it Francisco Lindor, who continues to just come through whenever you need it, right? There was probably a little bit of pressure on the New York Mets coming into this game, right? You lost game 1 in blowout fashion. You have to get onto this bullpen early, because you have the advantage. You have Sean Manaea on the hill. And what does Lindor do? He works the hitter's count, gets ahead 2-1. Then he fouled off 4 pitches, gets into the 8th pitch of the at-bat, gets a cutter that was right down the middle, crushed it. 1-0 Mets. That got the ball rolling. The Mets didn't score again in the first inning, but Mark Vientos hit a line drive at 105 miles per hour. Brandon Nimmo drew a walk. Pete Alonso hit a double play ball about 107 miles per hour. So it just showed you the Mets were pretty locked in. And then the second inning, they had the big inning that ultimately wins this game. Starling Marte, who continues to just be unbelievable, right? I mean, you talk about the impact of Marte, and it feels like in some ways he's kind of the straw that stirs the drink, right? 2022, when the Mets were the best team in baseball for a long time, Starling Marte was having an all-star season. He gets hurt. The Mets fade late. Last year, Marte's a disaster. The Mets are a disaster. Now here you go, big playoff games, and Starling Marte is one of the best bats in this lineup, just consistently giving you good at-bats. He leads off that second inning with the single. Jesse Winker draws a walk. Jose Iglesias pops out. Tyrone Taylor comes up. And for those of you who listened to the show this morning, I was sort of campaigning for them to maybe bench Tyrone Taylor. Now, we learned today that Brandon Nimmo is dealing with plantar fasciitis. So to think that a guy with a foot injury is going to play center field now, maybe that's not, a likely outcome at this point. So you're probably going to have Tyrone Taylor out there all the time because he's a better option than Harrison Bader. And he gets one of the biggest hits of this game, ripping a double that scored Marte. Francisco Alvarez, who we can talk about him at some point, he has not looked good in the box. You wonder if Luis Torrens might get a start at some point. I mean, if there was a time to start him, you know that Sevy has thrown pretty well to Torrens this year. So that's more for tomorrow's show, but we'll talk about that again at a later date. Alvarez pops out. So there's 2 outs, 2 runners in scoring position. Francisco Lindor comes up. And I was thinking, as soon as Lindor steps in, I'm like, they got to walk him, right? First base is open. But what does that do for Mark Vientos? Mark Vientos, a guy that's been playing with a chip on his shoulder all year. They want to face me with the bases loaded, the best hitter on the Mets this postseason by OPS. You really want to come at Mark Vientos, and Vientos makes them pay. Has a great at-bat, works a full count, fouls off a really tough slider on a 3-2 pitch to hang in that at-bat. Then he gets one he can handle, and typical Mark Vientos fashion, hits one out to right center field, one of the deepest parts of the ballpark, crushes it. And that grand slam made us all just breathe easy. And I thought we were going to. I thought it was going to be a super fun, easy Mets victory. Manaea 7 shutty. Maybe you still go to your guys with the day off tomorrow, and it's just a 6-0 victory, right? That's what we were all hoping for. And that's what it felt like it was going to be, because early in the game, Sean Manaea was brilliant. He was making it look easy. Through the first 5 innings, Sean Manaea allowed just 2 hits, 2 walks, struck out 7, gave up 1 run in the 5th inning on a solo homer at the bat of Max Muncy, but settled right back in and got through it. So you felt like, all right, even if he doesn't get through 7, 6 innings, 1-run ball, hands it off to the bullpen, everything's going to be fine. Well, 6th inning is when this game started to fall apart, and it got really, really nerve-wracking. Manaea walks Mookie Betts and Teoscar Hernandez to lead off that 6th inning. And then the defense, because he gets a tailor-made double play ball off the bat of Freddie Freeman. Now, that did take a crazy hop on Jose Iglesias. But still, Jose Iglesias has handled so many ground balls this year, and he's handled tough hops away from him, where we've seen him do the spinorama, make all these crazy plays. This one was hit right to him. So the fact that Iglesias did not field that ball, it felt like a really bad omen. And again, it was off the bat of Freddie Freeman. He's dealing with an ankle injury. So, I mean, honestly, in that moment, right, if Iglesias fields it and it was hit hard, it's an easy double play. Runner on third base, 2 outs. Maybe Manaea stays in there. I don't know. But that one should have been turned a brutal error. They go to Phil Maton to get out of it. And I was surprised. I was expecting Ryan Stanek to be the guy in that situation. But this shows you that Carlos Mendoza has faith in Phil Maton. And Maton delivered. He did. He gets a pop out. And then he does give up a base hit. But, I mean, it was a ground ball. And honestly, I feel like Pete Alonso should have had it. I feel like if he got his glove down, he would have. He deflects it, 2 runs scored. Then Maton walks Max Muncy to load the bases, gets a huge double play ball. So credit to Maton. He got 4 outs. And also, I got to say, too, speaking of infield defense, right? Iglesias should have fielded that double play ball. I feel like Alonso should have fielded that ball, at least kept it in the infield. And then Mark Vientos double clutched. Shades of J.D. Davis. Luckily, the turn was still there to get a fairly fast runner in Kike Hernandez. So the Mets were able to get out of it, but that was a super nerve-wracking inning. 7th inning, Maton stays on, gets Pajes out, and then they just keep him in to basically throw 4 balls to Shohei Ohtani. Ryan Stanek comes on to face Mookie Betts, and it was a just blow him away at bat. 3 pitches, strikes him out, gets a ground out, gets out of the inning. I felt so good about Stanek. Goes back out for the 8th, gets the first 2 outs. Then he gives up a single. Then he walks a batter. And here comes Edwin Diaz. And I know all of us were nervous. Edwin threw a couple of really good sliders. I'm like, all right, he's locked in against Kike Hernandez. The one that he got him out, though, was a hanger right down the middle. I mean, that could have been a much different ball game if a different batter was up, because I know Kike is awesome in the playoffs, but it's still not the top of the Dodgers lineup, right? You throw that pitch to Mookie Betts, it's probably in the seats. Luckily, it was Kike. He flies out. The Mets get out of that inning. They get an insurance run in the 9th, which was big. Right back around to Alonso and Marte as far as coming through. Pete draws a walk and showed great discipline. Balls that he was chasing out of the zone during the season, he's not now. And he's a completely different hitter. That's the guy that you want to pay and keep in a Mets uniform. He gets on, and then really heady. He steals second base because Pete Alonso has wheels. We've talked about that on this show for a long time. Very underrated with his speed, but you don't expect him to steal bases. He's only stole 3 all year. He's got 2 in the postseason, and it was a huge stolen base because Starling Marte comes through with the base hit up the middle. Pete read it off the bat, was going on contact, just knew exactly where the fielders were, makes a great turnaround third, and dives home. And remember, there was that play. It's sort of like everything comes together. There was that game the Mets lost. I think it was against the Cubs, right? Where Alonso dove and he didn't keep his hand down. And his hand kind of bounced up and they were able to tag him out. He got that hand right on the ground all the way through, did not make that mistake, just beat the tag. That gave you an insurance run that helped you breathe a little bit more in the 9th. But it's still Edwin Diaz, who can be a little bit shaky. And he let the first 2 guys on, gave up a leadoff single and a walk. I tweeted this out. For those of you who didn't see that, I got a new hack. I haven't committed to it as much as I did today, but today I was all in on this because it was so nerve-wracking late. Pull up Game Day on one tab. I got 2 monitors in my office. I got the game going on the monitor to the right and the one straight ahead. I got Game Day because Game Day It's about 20 seconds faster than the Hulu stream that I'm watching the game on. And man, that helps you. It helps you because you can get ahead of it and see if, okay, something horrible is about to happen. There was a line drive off the bat of Will Smith. I think that was in the 8th inning when Ryan Stanek was in. And I joked about it on Twitter. I said, man, I was still nervous, even though I knew it was an out, because I saw him on the game day it was an out. But then you watch off the bat, and you know it's Nimmo running. Great catch, by the way, by Brandon to leap and make that grab. As you get to that point, though, 2 runners on, Diaz on the mound. I got my dad on speaker. We're talking. I was helping him out. I want to make sure, he's in great shape, but he's still getting close to his 60s. I don't need his heart racing too much. I said, listen, let me tell you what's happening here. And Edwin Diaz got the job done, man. After getting those first 2 base runners on, he buckled down, strikes out Mookie Betts, strikes out Teoscar Hernandez and Freddie Freeman, and looked as sharp as he has all season to those 3 batters. All of a sudden, that slider had that great bite to it. His fastball running off adrenaline, upper 90s, up in the zone, able to just throw it past guys. Tough for them, too, with the shadows coming in for the Dodgers hitters with that late afternoon game, or at least at that point, I guess early afternoon when they started it, but late afternoon by the end of this game in LA. Huge victory, though, for the New York Mets. Okay, like I said, nerve-wracking at the end, but the lineup came through. They scored early. They even got the insurance run late. I feel good about where they're at offensively. Sean Manaea, while it wasn't the best start because of the ending, he still has a little piece of Mets history. I think it was Matthew Brownstein on Twitter, which he is a really good follow. You should check him out. I retweeted it, so if you go to Finkelstein Ryan, you can see his tweet. If it wasn't him, I think it was. But he tweeted out a great stat. In Mets history, Sean Manaea is now in an inner circle of Mets pitchers for a single postseason to have 3 starts of 5 innings pitched and 2 earned runs or less. The list, let me see if I can remember off the top of my head. I'm going to pull it up real quick. It was Matt Harvey and DeGrom in 2015. Tom Seaver in 1973 had 4 starts, and it was Matthew Brownstein who tweeted this at M Brownstein 89. So Seaver 80 in 73, he had 4 starts of 5+ innings pitched, no more than 2 earned runs allowed. John Matlack had 3 that year. Bob Ojeda had 3 in 1986. Then again, Harvey and DeGrom, and now Sean Manaea. So you feel good about that. You got Manaea set up to go back into LA for a game 6 potentially, where if the Mets can win 2 or 3 at home, that would be your clincher, and it might be this exact same setup, bullpen game versus Manaea. I think the Mets were playing some chess here, and that's what we're going to talk about next. All of the discussion about Kodai Senga and that start. And like I said on the show this morning, if Sean Manaea goes out and shoves and the Mets get the victory against the bullpen game, then it's all a moot point, and maybe the Mets had the right strategy all along. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from grocery to beauty supplies and more. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Join the over 50 million savers and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. And right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports, and you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Goal is to get to 11,000 subscribers by the end of the postseason. Appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so let's talk about the strategy of this series and how it ended up working out for the Mets. Maybe David Stearns was playing chess all along, and we just didn't realize it, because Sean Manaea going up against the Dodgers bullpen ended up being an advantage to the Mets. They were able to get that early momentum in the game. thanks to Lindor, thanks to Vientos, they were able to score those early 6 runs, and also Tyrone Taylor with the RBI double. And then you had Manaea. So you were cruising, and I felt like with Manaea on the hill, with that big of a lead, he was able to attack. And man, is it just awesome to watch this guy, because, we had some idea that this guy could be good. I remember when the Mets signed Sean Manaea in the offseason, and I was doing my own little analysis, looking at what went well for him as a Giants starter. And there was a lot of talk about the sweeper. At the time, I remember saying, I think the part about Sean Manaea that we aren't picking up on, and Driveline kind of noted this themselves. Driveline posted a video, that's who he worked with, about Manaea gaining velocity. And I remember saying, I think it's the fastball that the Mets like. They like the characteristics of his fastball, but it's completely different now that he has adopted this Chris Sale arm slot. And yeah, we're kind of getting hit over the head with that every time he pitches. It's all they're talking about, but rightfully so, because it has turned Sean Manaea into a completely different pitcher. We saw that there was, again, good characteristics on his fastball early in the season. The sweeper could be nasty, but there was still a little bit of a hole in the fact that righties could still get to Sean Manaea. He adds the changeup, which gives him another pitch to go at righties with, because that sweeper isn't always going to be there for you when you're facing a righty. You can throw it backdoor, steal strikes. You might, if you throw a really good one, you could throw a sweeper on the inner half and get a swing and miss. But having that changeup gave him that other wrinkle, and then that arm slot just completely changed things for him, where now, you see Sean Manaea can sort of get into that rocking chair. It's just easy for him. He knows what he's got. He's throwing that sinker up in the zone, and they just can't catch up to it. It's just a really tough pitch to pick up on. And if you do pick up on it, you barrel it, or even you hit it, to actually, square it up really well and drive it out, it's a tough pitch to hit. And that's how he gets so much, outs through contact. So Sean Manaea, I still think, is a huge advantage for the Mets in this series. Obviously, the start didn't end well, and maybe that's something they have to take note of. Maybe if you get 5 brilliant innings from Sean Manaea in Game 6, maybe you turn it over to the bullpen. I don't know. That's a decision for Carlos Mendoza at a later date. But now you look at how things set up. Luis Severino flew out ahead of the team with 59 eye black on, as someone and the media reported, which is a cool little note that he was still holding on to the traditions of this team, even on a flight to fly ahead to New York. He's going to be ready for Game 3 against Walker Buehler. I think that's advantage to Mets when it comes to the matchup. Game 4, it'll be Yoshinobu Yamamoto versus Jose Quintana, which is probably the best pitching matchup of this series, because Game 5 is going to be Flaherty against who knows what for the Mets. And then Game 6 would probably is back to Manaea versus a bullpen game. So Game 4 could very well be the swing game in this series, especially if the Mets can grab that Game 3, riding the momentum of this victory, and then playing in front of their home crowd again. Game 4 will be a very big one, right? Because if the Mets can win that one, they can beat Yoshinobu Yamamoto and go up 3-1. All of a sudden, now all the pressure is on the Dodgers. If it's even when you get to that point of a Game 5, and it's Jack Flaherty going up against, maybe it's Senga, maybe it's just a straight start from David Peterson, well, now that's going to be a little more difficult. But the great thing about this at this point, the New York Mets have set it up where as long as they get one game at home, they're going to take this thing back to LA, and they'll have Sean Manaea on the hill for a Game 6. Now, you want to make sure that you can clinch in that Game 6. But if you can do that, if you can take 2 of 3 at home now, if and when this series goes back to LA, you'll have 2 cracks at it, and you'll have theoretically your best 2 pitchers on the mound. I harped on it on today's show. I don't need to, do too much on it. For me, the bigger issue with starting Kodai Senga Game 1 was the fact that it took the ball out of Jose Quintana's hands potentially for a second start. I would have liked to see all 3 of Manaea, Severino, and Quintana getting multiple starts in this series, because Quintana, 11 scoreless so far in the playoffs. He's been amazing. At the same time, this might be a tougher matchup for him against the Dodgers here. And you know what? If he wins Game 4 and you win this series in 6, well, now Jose Quintana will be ready to go for the beginning of the World Series, not to get too far ahead of ourselves. But this was a game that sort of proved the Mets strategy was not as misplaced as it was originally construed. Again, I was, kind of mixed on it. Like I said, and I went into when I went on Thursday when I was previewing this series before we knew who the team was going to be. I said that Kodai Senga should start game 4. When we found out on Saturday, that it was going to be Kodai Senga, I said, all right, I guess I trust the Mets brass, but I still don't love it. After the game yesterday, I still had sort of a similar sentiment, but the big takeaway was if Sean Manaea and the Mets can win this game, well, now you did your job and you are sitting in a really good spot with the series heading back to New York. And that's where we're at this point. The Mets have a great chance to win this series, but it's not going to be easy. The end of this game showed us that 27 outs are going to be hard to get against this lineup. This is a really good Dodgers team. We still haven't even seen Shohei Ohtani have the big game that you feel like can come at any time. Mookie Betts hasn't had the big game that could come at any time. Freddie Freeman. So that order, not even to mention Teoscar Hernandez, they still have a lot of guys that scare you, and their bullpen, the top guys, they didn't use them in this game. So now their top guys are really rested, and I'd imagine that you're going to see them, particularly Games 3 and Game 4, Game 3 with it being Walker Buehler, Game 4 with it being Yoshinobu Yamamoto. They are going to be aggressive going to the bullpen if either of those starters lets up at all. And Buehler, probably a better chance you can get on him than Yamamoto. But either way, they got all their guys. They got Kopech, 3 days rest now. They got Evan Phillips, Blake Trinan, all these guys who have been lights out in the playoffs in particular. I feel like the way that this series, broke out through the first 2 games, Game 1 was all Dodgers. Game 2 was nearly all Mets, although the Dodgers still had a late fight in them. Now you got 5 games left. It's now a 5-game series, and I think these teams are evenly matched. So what do we have to look out for throughout the rest of this series? I want to talk about some just sort of general notes that I have, trends that we're seeing, and how will the Mets sort of adjust to them? Well, what's their strategy? I want to talk a little bit about how they're going to manage their bullpen. We're going to talk about Alvarez. Will we see Jeff McNeil at all in this series? Got a lot of little notes for us for the final segment, but really quick, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This NFL season, you can get started with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, where if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose, when you place your first $5 bet. So if you want to throw $5 on the Mets to win Game 3, you can do that, and you're going to win either way, as you're going to get those bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and you get the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day, so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. Going to be a Locked On Mets insider. Find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's talk about just some notes I have here. The first one is bullpen. Good so far, right? I feel like after all of the talk about the Mets bullpen that we had at the end of the season leading into the playoffs, and it's still there. It's still that big question mark, right? I feel like you have a good idea the Mets are going to give you solid at-bats. You feel pretty good about the Mets starting pitchers giving you length. But the question really is, how will the bullpen hold up when you have a lead? And this was one game where they got the job done. First off, Phil Maton got 4 outs, then Ryan Stanek got 4, Edwin Diaz got 4. So you got through the final 12 outs of the game with your top 3 relievers. And it's clear that's where Mendoza is going to turn to first. You look at Maton and Stanek, and those are guys that have had mixed results this year, but ultimately they are playoff battle-tested relievers, and David Stearns did a great job understanding the assignment of what this team needed and also where they were. Because, look, this playoff run, as amazing as it has been, it could have ended at the end of the year. The Mets might not have even made it into the dance. They were, in by a game, right? Then you talk about the wild card series. Pete Alonso doesn't hit that home run. It's an early exit. So as the president of baseball operations, you always have to sort of manage the present with the future. And he wanted to help this team, but he didn't want to kill the farm. And I know some might say he didn't do enough. He got two guys that have been in these big games where it took some of the variables away. Guys that have good stuff too. There's a reason why these guys continue to get paid. There's a reason why these guys continue to be trusted by teams. For Phil Maton, they got him early, and it got him for nothing, right? I mean, there might be a player to be named later. I can't remember if that came through, if it was just cash. Regardless, minimal return to get a guy in the beginning of July. And then Ryan Stanek, you make that trade, you give up a guy in Rylan Thomas who probably has a ceiling of a fourth outfielder. You get a guy in Stanek that has really good stuff, and we're seeing it now. Ryan Stanek is clearly the second best reliever in this bullpen to Edwin Diaz, and at times he almost looks like the best reliever. So I feel like you have guys, and again, you're taking the variables away. These are guys that are not going to be phased by a bad playoff outing. Phil Maton was horrible in that Phillies series. Just did not look good. What does he do in this series? Gets his first opportunity in a huge leverage spot. And they go to Maton before Stanek. I thought they might even go to Diaz in the sixth with Carlos Mendoza. I had no idea where they were going to go. They turned to Maton. He got the biggest outs of this game to stop the bleeding. And then Stanek, the way he blew away Mookie Betts in that spot, that was huge as well. So those are the three, and Reed Garrett has looked good. So that's really going to be something we're going to continue to game by game monitor. Can these guys hold up? But I feel like you have the arms now to do it. So that is a big check on the positive side for the New York Mets right now of, all right, they have the answers. They're there. It's just going to be a matter of if they continue to come through. And I think Edwin Diaz is still the linchpin, obviously. This was a good outing for him. Okay, he gets 4 outs, doesn't give up any runs, and the 3 strikeouts to end the game, that was vintage Edwin Diaz. That was Edwin Diaz where he throws that fastball up in the zone, they can't catch it, and then the slider at times was really good. It was still a little inconsistent, but overall, he did rip some really good ones, which is a huge thing to see because when Diaz doesn't have his slider, and especially this year, he doesn't completely trust his fastball. He's just not the same pitcher. He starts to nibble, and he gets himself in trouble. I like to see him not nibble at all, but hey, good outing by Edwin Diaz. We'll see if that holds up. They all get a day off, so they all should be good to go, even with getting 4 outs apiece for the next game in this series. The questions I have right now about this team. You look at the lineup. Starling Marte has got to be in there every day. He's earned that. Pete Alonso, Vientos, Lindor, not questioning it. Tyrone Taylor, did that double keep him in the lineup? Are they going to go to Harrison Bader at all? I just can't see it. And can Brandon Nimmo play center field with that foot? If the answer is no, it's got to be Taylor. The question then becomes, what is the chance that we see Jeff McNeil in this series? Are they going to go to him, or are they just too concerned about the rust to put him in there? Also, JD Martinez. Seems like Jesse Winker is the answer. You're looking at a Dodgers team that is right-handed heavy. They have one lefty in the entire pitching staff, much different than the Mets, who have 3 lefty starters. They have one lefty, Anthony Bando. Saw him today. That's it. It's the only lefty. There's no left-handed starting pitching. There's only one lefty out of the bullpen. So JD Martinez as the right-handed part of a sort of DH platoon now with Jesse Winker, are they going to stay away from him completely? I feel like the answer might be yes, and I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't seen Carlos Mendoza be a little more aggressive with his bench. We did see some defensive replacements late, but for example, Tyrone Taylor had an at-bat in that 9th inning. I was curious if they were going to have Jeff McNeil hit for him because you still could have put Harrison Bader in the game in center and put McNeil in left. They let Taylor hit. So that's just the thing I'm curious about. If the Mets have an advantage based on their depth, are they going to use it, or are they still going to kind of just ride the starters, in this case being Taylor in center, Marte in right, and Jesse Winker, your DH, with so many righties? I think they might go that route. I'm not saying that's a wrong thing. It's just something to watch out for. The other thing, Jose Iglesias. Are they going to keep playing him every single day, or are they going to try to get Jeff McNeil out there? I feel like Walker Buehler would be a pretty good matchup for Jeff McNeil. You're looking at Jose Iglesias. Let me pull up the stats. It hasn't been bad at bats, but but he hasn't looked nearly as dangerous. He's 1 for 5 today with a strikeout. He's got a 485 OPS in the playoffs. And I mean, I'm not going to hold that error against him too much, but are you really not confident that Jeff McNeil can play a solid second base? I was actually a little surprised that they went with Acuna as a defensive replacement instead of McNeil, but I guess maybe they sort of understood that it wasn't necessarily guaranteed that Vientos' spot in the lineup was going to come up again. So you go with Acuna. Also, if it did come up and you needed a hit, you could have pinch hit Jeff McNeil and you would have been fine. That's part of what the positive aspects of so much depth really gives Carlos Mendoza. It gives him a lot of options. And Acuna has been playing all year, probably more in a rhythm to be playing a solid second base. But I'm just very curious. You added Jeff McNeil to the roster, and I think that was the right thing because he does give you that extra versatility. But is he really just a kind of a placeholder that they might not go to? We saw him get one at bat in game 1. I'm very curious if we see a Jeff McNeil playoff start. I think that there was a time for it. It would be game 3 with Walker Buehler on the mound. Maybe you give Jose Iglesias a day. You have to remember, Jose Iglesias was amazing this season, but he was at his best when you had Jeff McNeil sparing him a little bit, and you sort of found the matchups that really worked for him, and those are the games you dropped him in on. Obviously, this is a series, again, with a lot of right-handed pitching where it could make some sense to have Jeff McNeil hit, but I guess the question really just comes down to, do you believe that you're going to get a better at-bat out of Jeff McNeil, who's had 10 Arizona Fall League at-bats and 1 postseason at-bat, or Jose Iglesias, who's been locked into the lineup the entire time? That's going to be a thing to monitor here as you continue to see the rest of this series. So those are sort of my first gut reaction things to watch out for. I guess the last one, too, before we close. Francisco Alvarez has not been good. Now, he is a leader on this team, even at 22 years old. The pitching staff loves throwing to him. You know, he's a better framer than Luis Torrens, but Torrens has a better arm. And I just wonder, are you just going to continue to ride Alvarez when these at-bats have not been good? It seems like he's trying to play, hero ball himself. He wants to hit the big playoff homer, and that's not the best version of Alvarez. Alvarez is at his best where he's really controlling the strike zone, getting those hits, and he doesn't need to force the power. That's the frustrating thing. And that's what I think he's going to learn. I still believe, even though it was a down season offensively, 710 OPS for the year, only 11 home runs that they're hitting, 25 last year. It definitely wasn't the best season from Alvarez from an offensive standpoint. I still believe that this is a guy that will be an all-star one day, and an all-star with his bat. Like I still think it's in there, and I still think there's that potential that you always feel like he might finally give you that big at bat. And most of these teams, they're riding their starting catcher through the playoffs. I don't think it's necessarily the wrong move to keep Alvarez in there, but something that I will pull when I'm doing a show later tonight, because we're going to have another episode as we'll sort of preview what's coming, or we'll see exactly what I decide to do for your Tuesday morning podcast, because we might actually save the game preview for, what would that be? Wednesday show. Days, man. They're all a blur at this point, but I might save the game preview. When we get to that point, though, I will be curious to look up and see the actual stats. I feel like Sevy has been better throwing Torrens. I might be wrong about that. So that's another thing to look out for. If there was a game to start Luis Torrens, it might be game 3. Regardless, this was a great day for the New York Mets. It got out to the early lead. Sean Manaea had a strong first 5 innings. 6th inning got away from him. The Mets bullpen shut the door, and that gives you a lot of encouragement moving forward about what is in store for the rest of this series. It's now a 5-game set. 3 of those games played in New York. The next 3 games, it's going to be a lot of fun when this series resumes. Until then, we all get to just soak in on this victory, enjoy it for the next 48 hours, and we'll be back in a couple of days with another live breakdown after game 3. I appreciate all of you who have tuned into the stream today. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you are notified whenever we go live next. For those of you who are listening to the replay or watching the replay on YouTube, we are going to have another show available to you 6 o'clock in the morning, just like always, posted on YouTube and on your podcast feeds before that. So make sure you tune into that show. Appreciate all of you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. After your second watch, head over and check out Locked On Sports Today, which is streaming 24/7 on YouTube. The first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports with our local experts from each team, league-wide experts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.